Far away from the chaos, two men were watching everything on a screen. The one sitting at the controls confirmed that the tutorial had just started. The older man leaned in, a small smile on his face. He remarked that this group seemed particularly interesting. On the screen, the situation was grim. A monster was attacking, and everyone was scrambling to fight it off. Everyone except for Yu Seong-hoon, who just stood back and watched. The older man didn't understand why things were moving so quickly. His assistant just pointed to the screen, directing his attention to the blonde-haired man. His name was Shin Pilsub. Turns out, he'd woken up before anyone else and was the first to figure out the system. After learning what he needed, he simply pretended to be passed out again. The older man burst out laughing. He couldn't believe Pilsub knew about the status and skill windows, but chose not to tell a single soul. He found the guy's cleverness incredibly entertaining. But he wasn't the only one who stood out. The assistant pointed to another man, Kim Chang-suk, explaining that he was amazing too. He already had a skill right from the very beginning. The older man clarified that it wasn't just any skill. It was a high-ranking one. Getting a B-rank skill at the start of the tutorial was almost unheard of. The assistant explained that Chang-suk's skill was the only thing keeping the group from panicking. Thanks to him, they were actually organized and ready to fight. The older man was impressed. He wondered if they'd be the first to complete the tutorial. But then, something on the screen made him stop. He couldn't believe it. He stammered, completely confused by what was happening. His assistant just stared, looking just as shocked. Standing in front of the massive screen, the older man just said that what he was seeing was truly shocking. And this is what they saw. Back in the room, someone had attacked Kim Chang-suk from behind, slicing deep into his neck. It was Yu Seong-hoon. As Chang-suk collapsed, Seong-hoon apologized, saying this was the only way he could survive. That's when Yumina started screaming. She was completely losing it, screaming over and over that this had to be a nightmare. But Seong-hoon just stood there, watching her fall apart. His face was completely blank. This wasn't a nightmare for him. This was a choice. He didn't even look back. He just walked away from Mina's body, leaving a trail of brutal footprints. Seong-hoon paused, his expression cold. He knew there was still one person left. That last person was Shin Pilsup. He was frozen, watching in absolute horror. He couldn't even form the words. He just stared, trying to understand what was happening. A system window popped up. It congratulated Seong-hoon on clearing the tutorial. His tendency was now listed as demonic. He wiped the blade clean with a small, satisfied smile. He had passed the test. Now he was ready for the mission. Suddenly, a voice greeted him by name. Seong-hoon turned, completely caught off guard. The man was dressed in a sharp white suit and bowed politely. He introduced himself as Jerry, Seong-hoon's personal supporter. Jerry explained that the mission was a giant contest created by the gods to choose their next successor. The longer you survived, the better your chances of becoming one of them. Seong-hoon listened carefully. A mission to become a god, a status window, and now this guy Jerry. It all confirmed what he already suspected. This wasn't the world he knew. Seong-hoon commented that the whole thing felt like something out of a fantasy story. Jerry agreed that it was a lot like a game, but he warned that there was one very important difference. He explained that in this world, you could really die. There were only two ways to leave: become a god or die for good. Seong-hoon wasn't impressed. He understood what Jerry was really saying. There was no going back home alive, but Jerry told him not to worry. Turns out, every player gets resurrected once after they die. Basically, they all had 2 lives. That made Seong-hoon stop. If everyone had 2 lives, what about the 3 people he had just dealt with in the tutorial? But he pushed the thought aside. He held up his injured hand and asked Jerry if he could fix it. Jerry just smiled and agreed. As Jerry healed him, a new title appeared above Seong-hoon's head. It read, Betrayer. Jerry watched him silently. He couldn't believe it. To get a title like Betrayer during the tutorial was almost impossible. He wondered just what kind of person he was dealing with. Shaking off his surprise, Jerry announced it was time for Seong-hoon to prepare for the real test. He explained that the tutorial rewards were waiting in his inventory, and he could use them to buy items and skills for the battles ahead. Seong-hoon took his time, carefully studying every option in the system store. Jerry just watched, wondering how long this was going to take. The system confirmed his purchases: 2 basic swordsmanship skills and a low-grade inventory. Jerry was surprised. He'd bought the expensive inventory without even hesitating. But he wasn't done. He also bought food and camping tools. Jerry was impressed. The guy clearly knew what was important for the long run. Instead of some high-class skill, he chose a simple shock magic book, a perfect choice for a game where survival was everything. With his new gear and a sword at his side, Seong-hoon decided that was enough. He was ready. Jerry smiled, telling him that since his preparations were finished, it was time to move on to the real test. Seong-hoon had no idea what he was talking about. That's when Jerry presented him with his final task. He pointed to a small, friendly-looking dog and told Seong-hoon to kill it. Seong-hoon was completely stunned. He just stared at the animal, unable to believe what he'd just been asked to do. Jerry explained that killing the dog was the last test. If Seong-hoon did it, he could finally rest, and the dog wouldn't even fight back. He smiled, reminding Seong-hoon that this wasn't so different from what he'd already done. Seong-hoon's face was grim. He was right. He had already taken 3 lives. He gripped his sword, figuring one more wouldn't change anything. Jerry was pleased that he didn't hesitate, but as soon as it was over, Seong-hoon clutched his mouth, looking like he was about to be sick, and then he was on the ground, throwing up. Jerry just watched from a distance, calling him a strange and contradictory person. Jerry sighed, thinking this was the moment Seong-hoon would break and ask to be sent back. He figured things were going too well. But then, Seong-hoon reached out and grabbed his leg. Jerry had no idea what was happening. But instead of asking to be sent back, Seong-hoon looked up and asked for more. He wasn't breaking down. He wanted to do it again. Jerry's smile looked a little forced, but he agreed. This wasn't about cruelty. It was a chance for him to practice his skills before the real mission started. After that first dog, he took down about 100 more animals, horses, cows, anything they gave him. Then he moved on to goblins, lizard men, and orcs. He kept at it until he was completely familiar with the sword. After one last piece of advice from Jerry, he was ready to begin the mission for real. He appeared in a flash of light, right in the middle of a town square. Other players were materializing all around him, looking completely lost. While the other players panicked, screaming about being trapped in another strange place, Seong-hoon just watched them quietly. He was already thinking ahead. He knew this wasn't the time to wander around. The real game had started, and his first priority was finding a supporter like Jerry. He found what looked like a mission station. An attendant greeted him with a wide smile, welcoming him as a player. She explained that if players didn't want to leave the city, they could take on quests here. For a beginner, she suggested something simple, like getting rid of some rats. The whole thing felt like a game, but he knew his life was on the line. He decided the best plan was to gain stats and raise them as quickly as possible. He pointed at the rat quest and accepted it. The attendant confirmed his choice and told him he was being moved to the mission area. As he was teleported away, he figured it was just a few rats. This would be over quickly. He was wrong. The second he arrived, he was already fighting for his life. He quickly realized this was a lot harder than it looked. The rats were too small and fast for him to catch with his sword. He wondered how he was supposed to catch even one, let alone 5. To make things worse, they hadn't told him how to cancel a quest. That meant if he couldn't complete this, he was stuck in this storage room forever. At least he'd been smart enough to buy food before coming here. As he was eating, something clicked. He remembered the lowest grade poison he'd packed. This was the perfect tool for the job. He laced some food with the poison and left it out. A system message popped up almost immediately, congratulating him on his success. He was teleported back to the mission station. The attendant was amazed, praising him for completing the quest so quickly. His speed immediately drew the attention of the other players. They started whispering, wondering how he'd cleared a quest so fast. All the attention was just frustrating. He decided to just laugh it off. A system window appeared, explaining an effect from his betrayer title. It was called Blade Hidden in the Sound. It meant his laughter hid his true feelings, making him harder to provoke. A couple of players approached him. The guy politely asked if Seong-hoon could share some information about the rat quest. Seong-hoon's first thought was to just ignore them completely, but then he stopped. An idea started to form in his mind. Instead of answering their question, Seong-hoon asked what the man's title was. The player was a bit confused, but he told him his title was Courageous Survivor. Seong-hoon figured a title like that meant the guy was probably trustworthy. And since his own title was Betrayer, making a few connections now could be useful down the line. So he gave them some friendly advice. He warned them not to take the rat quest unless they were thoroughly prepared. The other player was confused, pointing out that Seong-hoon had just cleared it with no problem. That's when other players started shouting. They accused him of lying to hoard the easy quests for himself, calling him a scammer. Seong-hoon just hid his face and smirked. He couldn't believe how easy they were to fool. Just as he planned, the crowd swarmed the mission board, all fighting to get the rat quest. While they were all distracted, Seong-hoon quietly walked up to the attendant and asked for the much harder wolf hunting quest. As Seong-hoon walked away, a couple nearby was trying to decide on a quest. The man suggested hunting pests, but the woman was nervous, thinking the rat quest sounded easier. His plan was already working. That's when the man spotted Seong-hoon. He called out, asking if he wanted to join their party. He explained that he and his girlfriend had been working together since the tutorial and that teaming up was the best way to clear quests. But Seong-hoon didn't even hesitate. He just said he hunts alone and walked away. He entered the hunting grounds by himself. Instead of just waiting for the wolves, he started preparing the area, carefully setting a trap on the ground. Then he pulled out a dagger and coated the blade with a thick layer of poison. A moment later, his target appeared. A massive wolf stepped out of the shadows, growling. Seong-hoon stared it down, completely calm. This was the first thing he had to deal with. But he wasn't facing just one. There were 2 of them. One was already caught in the trap he'd laid, but the other was free, circling him. He drew his sword, deciding to take care of the trapped one first. The trap snapped shut on the wolf's leg, and it howled in pain. With the creature stuck, Seong-hoon moved in for the final blow. But while his back was turned, the second wolf lunged. It came at him with its teeth bared, ready to tear him apart. He turned just in time, realizing he couldn't ignore the second threat. That's when he used his secret weapon. A blast of shock magic shot from his hand, hitting the wolf mid-air. He smiled. The skill was more useful than he thought. With the second wolf stunned, he turned to finish the one caught in the trap. His sword sliced deep into the creature's side, but the magic didn't last forever. The second wolf recovered and lunged, sinking its teeth right into his shoulder. He tried to pull his sword free from the first wolf, but it was stuck fast. He was trapped. He had to do something else. He let go of his sword and kicked off the ground hard. Using his own weight, he slammed them both into the dirt. That's when he reached for his other weapon. He was absolutely furious. He stabbed the wolf over and over, shouting at the creature as he took it down. He caught his breath, the fight finally over. He realized his poison and trap skills worked together, making his attacks much harder to notice. He had perfected this combination while hunting rats. Now, he could take down 30 wolves all by himself. Back in town, he turned in the quest. The attendant shouted from her window, announcing that he was the first to clear it again. He just wished she would be quiet. She just laughed, telling him it was normal for people to be surprised. Then she asked if he was okay after the hunt. He wasn't interested in chatting. He cut her off and asked if she knew where he could find an inn. The woman told him to just head left from the square. Without another word, he turned and walked away. He found the inn and went to go inside. But just as he reached for the door, a hand shot out and stopped him. A big guy stood in the doorway, arms crossed. He demanded to see Seong-hoon's money before he would even let him in, explaining that too many broke people tried to get a room. Seong-hoon didn't say anything. He just reached into his bag. He pulled out a huge sack of gold. The man's attitude changed instantly, and he practically begged Seong-hoon to come inside. Once inside, he sat down at a table. The waitress told him they could prepare anything, so he ordered some meat and rice. While he waited, he pulled up his status window. It confirmed his name was Yoo Seong-hoon, and his title was still Betrayer. He realized all his stats were now above 10, making him physically stronger than an ordinary person. He wondered if this growth speed was normal, or just because his skills were still low rank. That's when he noticed someone looking at him from across the room. It was that couple from before. The man walked over to his table with a friendly smile. He said it was a coincidence seeing him again, and asked if they could join him. They stood there, waiting for his answer. Seong-hoon considered it for a moment, then gave a slight nod. The man introduced himself as Lee Youngi and his girlfriend as Park Hyena. Seong-hoon told them his name in return. Youngi thanked him, saying his warning helped them dodge a bullet. Seong-hoon had no idea what he was talking about. He realized it was true. He'd been so focused on missions that he hadn't heard any news about what was going on outside. The couple looked at each other as if they just had the same idea. That's when Youngi turned back to Seong-hoon and suggested a trade. He offered to tell Seong-hoon everything they knew in exchange for a meal. Right on cue, the food arrived, a huge plate of chicken. Seong-hoon leaned back with a small smile. He thought their approach was pretty bold. He thought about it. A meal for a few dozen guilds in exchange for valuable information? It was definitely a good trade. So he agreed. He told them he'd buy them a meal with 100 guilds, and now it was their turn to talk. Youngi started with the first piece of news. After the pest mission, riots had broken out all over the city. People panicked, and eventually, soldiers had to be sent in to stop the chaos. He said they dragged away anyone who kept resisting, and some people even died. But then, the dead came back to life, which caused a whole new uproar. Seong-hoon remembered what Jerry had said. Everyone had 2 lives. The second piece of information, Youngi explained, was directly related to the first. He called it the death penalty. He told Seong-hoon that anyone who was resurrected had all their stats reduced by 3. Since there were 6 stats, that meant a single death cost you 18 points. The penalty was enormous. For his third point, Youngi described the area around the square. There were mission stations, armories, restaurants, and inns. But he also mentioned a place called the Class Change Temple. Class Change. Seong-hoon checked his own status. He already had titles for swordsman and magician. He wondered if going to this temple could get him even more skills. Youngi added one last thing. He explained that most of the people who rushed to take the rat quest never came back. Seong-hoon already knew this, of course. Turns out, the quest was a trap, not because the rats were strong, but because they were just too fast to catch. Players would run themselves into the ground until they collapsed from exhaustion. Youngi admitted that he almost collapsed himself, saying he only survived because he brought enough food. Just then, their order arrived. The couple stared at the meal, the relief on their faces obvious. That's when Seong-hoon made his move. He offered to buy them food every single day in exchange for information. He figured 6,000 guilds a month was expensive, but it was worth it to not have to gather intel himself. Youngi didn't even hesitate. He grabbed Seong-hoon's hand and eagerly accepted the deal. With his new information network secured, Seong-hoon left the restaurant. The moment he stepped outside, he was swarmed. A crowd of desperate players surrounded him, begging for even a single penny. He looked at them with disgust. They all started in the same place, but these people had failed to adapt. To him, they were just worthless beggars. He started to walk away, ignoring their pleas. One of them got in his way, so Seong-hoon just slammed his shoulder into the man to move him. The man screamed, yelling that some psycho was going around hitting people. Seong-hoon didn't even look back. This whole thing reminded him of his past. Back then, he had to hide his true, evil nature, always bowing his head and pretending to be someone he wasn't. He'd spent his whole life concealing who he really was. But the man he'd hit wasn't done. He pointed right at Seong-hoon, shouting about the nerve of some people. Seong-hoon finally turned to face him. He warned the man to lower his voice if he didn't want to die. He didn't need to say anything else. Seong-hoon just turned and walked away, leaving the man to collapse on the street in total fear. The other players just stared, not daring to get involved. He made his way to the Temple of Class Change. Inside, a man with white hair introduced himself as Philip, a creation made to help players. Seong-hoon got straight to the point. He asked Philip why he already had classes like swordsman, thief, and magician in his status window. He wanted to know what made the classes from the temple different from the ones that just appeared on their own. Philip was surprised. It had only been 2 days, and this player already had 3 classes. He also noticed Sung-hoon's coat, which was different from what everyone else was wearing. He explained that the classes Sung-hoon had were just temporary. They changed based on what weapon he was using. If he used an axe, he'd become an axeman. If he only used magic, he'd be left with just magician. But the classes from the temple were different. They couldn't be changed. Philip said it wasn't about choosing a class, but about developing a player's core characteristics. Instead of just talking about it, Philip decided it was better to just show him. A massive list of potential classes appeared in front of Sung-hoon. The temple could create a special class by combining a player's experiences. A smaller window popped up with recommended options. When Sung-hoon asked if they were better, Philip just said they might be. The cost was 50,000 guild, but he could change it any time if he had the money. 50,000 guild was a huge amount, but Sung-hoon knew there had to be a big advantage to it. He started thinking, filtering out the classes that had limits on their abilities. In the end, only 2 were left, Swordsman and Righteous Outlaw. Both looked pretty good. He looked at the Righteous Outlaw class. There was one rule: no cowardly methods. That was a deal breaker. His entire strategy was built on traps and poison. The choice was easy. He told Philip he would be a swordsman. He handed over a bag with 50,000 guild. Philip was stunned. While people were starving outside, this man had already earned a fortune. Philip congratulated him. A moment later, the system confirmed the change. Sung-hoon was officially a swordsman. All his stats went up by 3, and he gained 2 new exclusive skills. The first skill, driving steps, let him confuse enemies with his movement. The second, never-ending spirit of inquiry, was a passive ability that helped him gather information at the cost of slightly slower skill growth. The new stats and skills were a massive upgrade. He left the temple, feeling the new power flowing through him. He was eager to test it out, but suddenly stopped. He felt like he was being watched. He was right. A man and a woman were staring at him from across the street. He sized them up. Their equipment was high quality. These 2 were definitely skilled players. Before he could figure out what they wanted, a commotion started nearby. A group of men had cornered a woman with swords on her back. One of them grabbed her, telling her their leader wanted a word. The woman didn't even flinch. She just told the man to let go of her arm if he wanted to keep it. He laughed, thinking she was crazy. The next thing he knew, her blade flashed and blood went flying. The man screamed, staring at where his hand used to be. From a short distance away, Sung-hoon watched the whole thing, completely unfazed. She calmly told him to keep blocking her path if he wanted to live the rest of his life with only one arm. Her threat worked. The men scrambled out of her way as she walked past without another word. That's when the red-haired man, Kang, approached Sung-hoon. He commented on the intense pressure the woman gave off, a skill called spine effect. Then he turned to Sung-hoon, saying it seemed like he could use his head. Kang told him not to play dumb. He'd figured out from Sung-hoon's gear that he was a big deal in the tutorial, and since he just left the temple, he must have already changed his class. Sung-hoon just listened, wondering if this was another stupid recruitment attempt. Kang then asked for his title, revealing that his own was leader. Sung-hoon knew that telling the truth would only bring suspicion, so he lied, using the title he'd heard from Youngie. He told Kang he was a courageous survivor. The man introduced himself as Kang Muhan and offered Sung-hoon a spot in his group. He promised trustworthy teammates and even money. Sung-hoon wasn't impressed. He just asked where the supposed strong guy was. Kang just laughed. He boasted that his strength stat was at 50. He figured the game-based stats on your abilities in the real world. If you were strong there, you were strong here. Sung-hoon thought about his own stats. Even with his class bonus, his strength was only 20. Game was completely unfair. He politely turned Kang down, saying he preferred to work alone. Kang just smiled and told him the offer still stood if he changed his mind. With that settled, Sung-hoon headed to the mission board. He knew that to survive in this city, he'd have to take on harder quests with bigger rewards. He walked up to the counter and requested a quest to fight a sick orc. Standing right next to him was a woman with a sword strapped to her back. He recognized her immediately. It was the same woman from before, the one who cut off that guy's hand. She turned to the receptionist and also asked for the sick orc quest. A light surrounded her, preparing to teleport her away. Sung-hoon realized she was aware of him. She was deliberately taking his quest. As he was teleported, he wondered if the difficulty was as high as a Slayer quest. Didn't matter. He just had to hurry. He reached out and touched the wall of light, entering the training ground. He started by setting a simple trap, a roasted chicken, right in the middle of the path. The orcs spotted it right away. One was ready to eat, but the other was smarter. It knew food in the middle of a forest was suspicious. From the trees, Sung-hoon watched impatiently. He didn't have time for this. That woman was probably after the bonus stats too, so he decided to force the fight. He unleashed his shock magic, blasting the area with electricity. The orc screamed in surprise, realizing a human was there. Sung-hoon stepped out of the shadows, his sword crackling with leftover energy. He charged forward, swinging his sword, but the orc blocked it easily. Sung-hoon realized his mistake immediately. The monsters Jerry had summoned for practice were nothing like the real thing. His techniques weren't working, and he had to think of something else, fast. The orc recovered from the blow, its grip tightening on its club. It swung down with all its might. In that split second, Sung-hoon knew if he couldn't come up with a plan, he was going to die. He'd completely miscalculated. He thought sick orcs would be easy, but his shock magic barely even slowed them down. The orc just laughed, roaring that the human was weak. Sung-hoon knew he was going to lose. The lead orc told the other to stay back, wanting to finish this himself. The creature stepped forward, ready for the fight. With his magic useless and his sword skills failing, he had only one active skill left. It was called dodging steps. As the orc's blade came crashing down, Seong-hoon activated it. He moved in a blur. It wasn't just a dodge. He used the skill to get inside the orc's guard and drove his sword deep into its side. The other orc couldn't believe it. Their leader had just been taken down by a human who looked completely worn out. He was breathing hard. That last move took everything he had, but he wasn't done yet. He looked up, his eyes sharp. The two of them stood there for a second, a good distance apart. The orc saw Seong-hoon shaking and thought he was finished. It grinned, believing he was too tired to block another attack, and swung its club with full force. But when the club came down, there was nothing there. Seong-hoon had disappeared. Before the creature could even turn around, Seong-hoon was already on it, his sword slicing deep. The orc begged for its life, but Seong-hoon just stared back, his expression cold. He had no mercy for it. He drove his sword through the orc's back. The creature went down hard. Lying on the ground, Seong-hoon finally caught his breath. He admitted to himself that he really thought he was going to die. He completely underestimated them. That one mistake almost cost him his first life. The quest only required him to take down 3 orcs, but he needed more battle experience, and he wasn't going to waste the potential rewards. He knew fighting them head-on was a bad idea. A sly grin spread across his face. He had other ways. Meanwhile, at the orc camp, there was a problem. One of them was shouting, demanding to know why the scouts hadn't returned. Inside, an orc elder was told that 14 of their own were missing. The elder was furious, blaming humans and ordering everyone to prepare for a fight. But one of the orcs spoke up. He explained that most of them were sick with a high fever and couldn't even move. The orc elder was losing his patience. He screamed at his subordinate, asking if he planned on just letting the humans pick them off while the disease spread. The other orc bowed, terrified, and promised to gather everyone right away. But the elder wasn't done. He promised to make an example of anyone who failed, threatening to feed them to the beasts. Out in the woods, everything seemed quiet. 2 sick orcs were making their way down a path, coughing. They complained about how brutal it was to be forced out here while they could barely stand. Then, one of them stepped on something hidden beneath the leaves. The ground gave way, and he fell straight into a pit. His friend yelled out, realizing it was a trap. The orc landed on a bed of sharp, poisoned spikes. This was Seong-hoon's plan all along. Using traps and poison to weaken them was more than enough. The other orc reached down, desperately trying to pull his friend out. The surviving orc was furious, screaming that it was going to make the human pay. Seong-hoon didn't even flinch. He just said that their goals were the same. He blocked the orc's attack. He knew fighting 2 at once would be a problem, but one-on-one was manageable. This was all part of his plan. He couldn't always rely on his skills, especially if his magic ran out. So he'd been forcing these one-on-one fights to get better at pure swordsmanship, and it was working. He could feel himself getting stronger, little by little. He activated his skill, dodging steps, and shot forward. The orc's head hit the dirt. The fight was over in an instant. Even as it lay there, it tried to threaten him, warning that its friends wouldn't let this go. Seong-hoon just gurgled as Seong-hoon drove the blade deeper. He demanded to know where the rest of its group was. The creature collapsed. Without a second thought, Seong-hoon ripped out one of its tusks before stepping on its head, making sure it was finished. A small smile crept across his face. He was sure he'd have no problem clearing this quest. His inventory was already filling up with weapons he'd taken. He'd been grabbing the tusks too, guessing they were probably the most expensive part. He quickly calculated his remaining magic. With his skills, he could handle 2 orcs at once if he had to. He only needed to take down a few more to finish the quest, but he was worried about that black-haired woman. If she got the first clear bonus, all this effort would be for nothing. He had to hurry. He moved carefully through the woods, stopping behind a tree to scout the area ahead. And there it was, the sick orcs' village. But it was completely silent. There were no guards, no one moving around. Something felt off. He decided to sneak in, trying to ignore the awful smell in the air. Inside, he found them. The orcs were lying in wooden boxes, barely moving. He noticed the same red rashes he'd seen on the others, but these were much worse. They were so sick they couldn't even get up. He raised his sword. This was going to be easier than he thought. He looked down at the helpless orc. He told himself not to hesitate. He'd done this to countless others back in the first room. The creature begged for help, whimpering that it was in so much pain. But Seong-hoon just stared back, his eyes empty. To him, this orc was just a piece of meat, and a quick death was the only mercy it would get. The sounds of the slaughter echoed through the small village. He took a breath. He'd taken down 29 of them. Just one more, and the quest would be over. But he'd been so focused, he didn't hear them coming. An orc shouted that it found a human's tracks. A whole group started searching the area. From his hiding spot, he saw the orc elder. The leader was furious with himself. He knew the illness was clouding his mind. Otherwise, he would have smelled the blood from the shed long ago. But the elder took a step forward, right over a thin wire hidden in the dirt. The elder's foot caught on the wire, sending him stumbling forward. He looked down and realized it was just a simple fishing line. Before the elder could recover, Seong-hoon was on him, swinging his sword down without a moment's hesitation. But the elder wasn't finished. He roared that he wouldn't be underestimated and unleashed a fire arrow spell right at Seong-hoon. Seong-hoon's eyes narrowed. He activated his skill, driving steps. He could see the arrow's path perfectly in his mind. The skill let him move with incredible speed, dodging the attack by a hair. But his body couldn't quite keep up with his mind. He lost his balance for a split second, and the flames caught his shoulder. The elder laughed, gloating that the human would burn to ashes, but he had no idea that Seong-hoon had a passive skill, always working in the background. Turns out, he had a low-grade magical resistance. It wasn't much, but it was enough to reduce the damage. The fire on his shoulder burned for a moment, and then just went out. The orc elder stared, completely stunned. His fire magic had just disappeared. A second later, he collapsed to the ground, the fight completely gone from him. The other orcs saw their leader fall and screamed that they would make the human pay. But Seong-hoon didn't even look concerned. Just then, a system window appeared. The mission was complete. He didn't hesitate. A bright blue light surrounded him as he chose to leave. The orcs could only watch, confused, as he vanished right before their eyes. In an instant, he was back in the safety of the city. The system showed him his rewards. He got a good amount of gold, a charm, and even a permanent increase to his strength. He realized his driving step skill was more useful than he thought, and decided to put more points into dexterity. He also got the Elder's Wand. It wasn't anything special, just a simple wand that reduced magic cost by 1%. Still, it was better than nothing. As he was walking through the city, he suddenly stopped. He felt a presence behind him. He turned around and saw a woman with a long ponytail, carrying a sword. It was Miri. He wondered if Miri had also cleared her quest on the hardest difficulty. He decided he was probably still a step ahead of her, though. Feeling like he hadn't even hit his limit, he walked over to the quest board to find another mission. He walked up to the counter and told the quest giver, Sarasi, that he'd take the Ratman elimination quest. She was surprised he was jumping into another mission so soon. In the background, Miri watched silently. Just as he was about to leave, Miri stepped up to the counter. She told the quest giver she would also take the Ratman elimination quest. The woman was surprised, but agreed to send her right away. Seong-hoon couldn't believe it. She was taking the same mission as him again. The moment Miri arrived, she spotted her target, a Ratman, wearing a small hood, noticed her instantly. Before the creature could even react, she was on it. It was already on the ground, completely helpless. The Ratman screamed, completely shocked by her sudden appearance. Miri just stared back, unimpressed. It panicked, realizing this was a fight it couldn't win. The creature scrambled to get away, but Miri was already mid-swing. She activated her skill, flying swordsmanship. Her blade cut through the air, sending the Ratman flying backwards with a final scream. Just like that, it was over. As she stood there, her mind went back to Seong-hoon. She remembered the wand he was carrying. It was the Orc Elder's wand. That could only mean one thing. He had cleared the mission on Slayer difficulty. She stood there, thinking about what she'd seen. She couldn't help but wonder if Seong-hoon was actually stronger than her, but she quickly dismissed the idea. Their methods were completely different. She had taken on 30 sick orcs head-on, crushing them all. She didn't use traps or attack helpless enemies like he did. Her own skills were powerful enough to surpass special forces. She decided there was no way he was stronger. He didn't feel powerful, just rude. Meanwhile, Seong-hoon had just finished his own mission. He felt an itch and wondered if someone was talking about him. Shrugging it off, he got back to work, carefully applying poison to a piece of cheese. He took his haul to the shop to sell. The shopkeeper was amazed, asking how on earth he'd managed to bring back so many werewolf teeth and hearts. But Seong-hoon wasn't satisfied. He knew it still wasn't enough, not compared to that woman. At the quest counter, the receptionist congratulated him on clearing the mission so quickly. But then she told him that Miri had managed to finish first this time. He started to wonder if his methods were holding him back. Maybe using poison and traps was just too slow to keep up with her. The thing about this world was that the NPOCC sites weren't just simple programs. They were basically people, created by the gods, each with their own personality. The shopkeeper, a guy named Julu, was explaining that if you tried to steal from him, you'd get thrown out immediately. After just 2 months, the city had already developed a clear social structure. There were the poor, who had to sell everything they owned just to eat. And then there were the normal players, who were neither strong nor weak, just getting by. And at the very top was the highest class, the rankers. These were the players with extraordinary talent, and they held all the power in the city. Seong-hoon walked into a shop, ready to spend the money he'd earned. The woman behind the counter, Hogan, greeted him, asking if he was finally ready to buy a skill. He just told her to hand over the books. He was buying 2 skills, intermediate grade swordsmanship and intermediate grade poisoning. The total came out to a massive 80,000 guild. The swordsmanship skill would boost his longsword power, while the poisoning skill would make his poison stronger and much harder to detect. He had already spent a fortune on the best sword he could find. Now, with these new skills, he wondered if it would be enough to finally catch up to Mirinai. He couldn't forget that she had cleared the Moonlit Cave first, getting a powerful spear that she sold for 2 million guild. He was frustrated, always feeling like he was one step behind her. That's when he made up his mind. In order to finally catch up to Mirinai, he decided to take on the Moonlit Cave investigation again. Back in the city square, players were shouting, trying to form parties for missions. People were looking for groups to hunt goblins. But Seong-hoon was looking for something specific. He scanned the crowd until he found it. A group recruiting for the Moonlit Cave investigation. He approached the woman recruiting for the Moonlit Cave and asked about open spots. She explained that all positions were available, but they really needed a warrior for the front line. She looked him over, unimpressed. He was just wearing an old coat and carrying a normal longsword. He didn't look like a high-class player at all. She told him that even though the mission seemed easy, it was still a C-grade quest. Then she politely asked what his skills were like. So, Seong-hoon pulled up his stats. It was an official certificate from the temple that couldn't be faked. Her jaw dropped when she saw the numbers. His strength was 51, and his dexterity dexterity was 50, stats on the level of a ranker. He just calmly explained that his equipment was lacking because he got his stats through fate on a mission. Her entire attitude changed in an instant. She introduced herself as Sung Hyun and told him that with his abilities, he was more than welcome to join. She excitedly told him to follow her. She led him into a tavern where the rest of the group was waiting. She called out to a man named Dong Chol, announcing that she'd found a warrior. Dong Chol looked Sung Hoon up and down, clearly not impressed by his thin frame. But Sung Hyeon just smiled, telling him that Sung Hoon's strength was over 50 and his dexterity was over 80. Dong Chol was stunned. He asked if Sung Hoon was secretly a ranker. Sung Hyeon just repeated the story that he got his stats by fate. Dong Chol just shrugged, still wondering why she was being so helpful all of a sudden. The warrior introduced himself as Park Dong Cheol. Seong Hoon played his part perfectly, introducing himself and politely offering to call the older man Hyung Nim out of respect. Dong Cheol was clearly happy with the show of respect. He proudly showed off his huge axe, and Sung Hoon complimented it, saying he must be incredibly strong to wield it. The warrior laughed, completely falling for the act. But inside, Sung Hoon was just thinking what a dumbass the guy was for not even noticing the sarcasm. Dong Chol then pointed out the archer who brought him in, Sung Ayuon. Next, he gestured to a person in a mask sitting quietly against the wall. That was Eora, the thief. The last member was the magician, a famous ranker named Ellie. Sung Hoon was surprised to see a foreigner, but they greeted each other politely. A magician ranker was a big deal. Their skill books cost a fortune, which made them extremely rare. Looking at the party, Sung Hoon felt uneasy. 2 frontline fighters, a thief, and 2 ranged attackers seemed like a pretty dangerous setup, but Dong Cheol just laughed it off, telling him the moonlit cave mission was super easy. He was completely confident their party was more than enough to clear it. Sung Hoon knew exactly how easy the cave was, because he was the one who spread the rumor that it was easy in the first place. He had sold maps and shared information about the cave, all to trick people into thinking they needed a party to clear it. This was all part of his plan, but he wasn't there to clear the cave with them. He had a completely different goal in mind. He told Sung Hoon to relax, explaining that the monsters wouldn't show up until they were inside the cave. Sung Hoon just agreed quietly, but inside, he was judging them. They seemed so relaxed, like total amateurs. Sung Hoon's attention turned to the magician, Ellie. Just then, Dong Chol tried to flirt with her, offering his arm for support. She just stared at him, completely uninterested. Suddenly, the archer, Sung Ahyeon, jabbed Dong Chol hard in the side. He cried out in pain. Ahyeon told him to stop messing around and dragged him toward the cave. Watching them bicker, Sung Hoon couldn't help but wonder if the two of them were a couple. With that, the whole party started heading down into the moonlit cave. Sung Hoon walked beside Ellie, the magician. She seemed focused, her eyes scanning the path ahead. He pointed out how steep the path was and told her to be careful. Then he offered her his hand, saying they shouldn't get separated from the others. After a moment, she took it. Sung Hoon was thinking strategically. A magician ranker was an incredibly valuable piece on the board. He decided it couldn't hurt to make a good impression. As they walked deeper, the cave walls began to glow. They were filled with special ores that lit up the darkness like a starry night sky. Suddenly, the thief in the mask stopped everyone. He'd spotted a trap. Sung Hoon saw it too, thanks to his own intermediate grade detection skill. The thief quickly disarmed it, mentioning that his disassembly skill had just leveled up to intermediate. Sung Hoon watched him carefully. An intermediate grade skill was rare at this stage. This thief was more skilled than he let on, and Sung Hoon knew to be cautious. Sung Hoon turned his attention back to Ellie and asked if she was a ranker. She was modest, saying she wasn't sure, but that's what people called her. She admitted she was nothing compared to the top rankers. The top rankers weren't just strong players. They were on a completely different level, like gods among men. Two names stood out above all others. Mi Rinai, the demonic sword, who cleared this very cave all by herself, and Kong Mahan, the Spear King, who had built his own famous guild. Sung Hoon pressed the point, saying that since magician rankers are rare, she must be one of the best. But Ellie just smiled and humbly said she wasn't that great. Their conversation was cut short by a shout from up ahead. The werewolves were here. Two of them stepped out of the darkness, and their eyes fixed on the party. The rest of the group got ready, but Dong Chol stepped forward. He told everyone to stay back, saying he and Seong Hoon would handle one each. Sung Hoon couldn't figure out if the warrior was trying to show off or just save the team's energy. Either way, he decided to play along for now. Dong Chol charged in, swinging his huge axe with all his might. He slammed his fist right into the werewolf's face. The creature roared in pain, but before it could even recover, Sung Hoon's sword was already at its throat. Sung Hoon calmly challenged the werewolf to a one-on-one fight. The creature just roared back in fury. He knew werewolves were strong, but their attacks were simple. With all his points and dexterity, dodging was easy for him. In a flash, he moved in and ended the fight with a single, clean cut. Watching from a distance, Sung Ah-yeon whispered to Ellie. She asked if Sung Hoon might be a ranker, since he handled the werewolf so easily. Ellie could only agree. Sung Hoon glanced back at them. He told himself he was planning to hide his skills, but he just got too caught up in the fight with his new swordsmanship skill. It was the perfect excuse. On the other side of the cave, Dong Chol decided it was his turn to shine. He activated his power step skill, channeling a huge amount of energy into his next attack. The second werewolf didn't even see it coming. Dong Chol let out a huge laugh, clearly proud of himself. Sung Hoon, on the other hand, was still busy dodging his own werewolf. Dong Chol watched from the side, clearly unimpressed. He couldn't believe Sung Hoon was still fighting. After all, he'd finished his own fight in seconds, so he decided to show off again. He finished off the last werewolf with one heavy swing of his axe. Sung Ah-yeon and Ellie thanked him for his hard work. Dong-chul just brushed it off like it was nothing, but you could tell he was loving it. With the cave cleared, he turned to Sung-hoon. He asked why he was dragging out a simple fight for so long. Sung-hoon's answer was simple, and it was a complete lie. He just told them he hadn't learned any active skills. The entire group just stared at him, completely shocked. No active skills. It didn't make any sense. The entire party just stared at him, completely stunned. They couldn't believe it. A player with his stats, but no active skills. It was basically unheard of. He said it with a completely straight face, not a hint of shame in his eyes. The others just stared, completely stunned. Dong-chul had to ask again, just to be sure he heard right. Not a single active skill? Skills are broken down into two types. Active skills are the ones you have to use on purpose, while passive skills are always on. Most people try to balance them, but active skills are what win fights. Even the weakest one gives a huge damage boost. So literally everyone has at least one or two. So he just couldn't wrap his head around it. How was it even possible? Sung-hoon just gave a small smile. He apologized, saying they were just too expensive for him to learn. He added that he was just fortunate that his natural stats were high. Dong-cheol just watched him, thinking. The story made sense on the surface, but something about it felt off. Dong-cheol looked over the werewolf Sung-hoon had fought. He noticed it was covered in shallow cuts, but there was no single fatal wound. It seemed to prove Sung-hoon's story. He didn't have a powerful skill to finish the job. He pointed at Sung-hoon, looking like he was about to lose it, but then he calmed down, thinking it through. He realized he would have beaten any other player. Sung-hoon, though, had ranker grade stats and solid fighting basics, not just a reliance on skills. He just sighed and told everyone to get going. Sung-hoon simply apologized, as if nothing had happened. With the tension gone, they continued deeper into the cave. As they walked, Sung Ah-yeon asked Dong-chul what he thought of Sung-hoon. She admitted that Dong-chul had more explosive power, but she believed Sung-hoon's average combat ability was actually better. She estimated that if he really tried, he could probably hold off 4 werewolves at once. Dong-chul just listened, quietly taking it all in. Dong-chul didn't say anything. He just stared ahead, thinking about what she'd said. Behind him, Sung-hoon watched, his expression impossible to read. Their thoughts were cut short when a massive foot slammed down right in front of them. It was another werewolf, but this one was different. It was huge, and it roared with a fury that shook the entire cave. Dong-chul yelled for Ellie to attack. She was already casting, unleashing a powerful ice spear. The spell hit the creature dead on, freezing part of its chest. Before the werewolf could even recover, the hooded figure threw a volley of daggers. They all found their mark, and right behind them, the archer let an arrow fly. The arrow found its mark. With a final roar, the werewolf collapsed. The combined attack was more than enough to take it down. Dong-chul stood over the fallen monster, beaming with pride. He announced that with teamwork like this, they had nothing to worry about and should keep moving. Sung-hoon turned his attention to the hooded man, Il-woo. He complimented his skill and then asked what grade his dagger throw was. Il-woo warned him that asking about someone's skills was rude. Seong-hoon just smiled and apologized, saying he was only curious because Il-woo's aim was so much better than another thief he knew. After a moment, Il-woo answered. He admitted his skill was only low grade, but he'd been practicing a lot. Dong-chul walked over, interrupting them. He asked what their plan was, then said he was just going to kill 20 werewolves to clear the adventurer difficulty and get the reward. But Seong-hoon immediately shut that idea down. He told Dong-chul their team was too good for that and suggested they go all the way to slaughterer difficulty. The archer and Ellie looked worried. Ah-yeon pointed out that slaughterer difficulty would be way too hard. They'd have to kill the moonwolf and solve the mystery of the cave. Seong-hoon explained that clearing the dungeon on adventurer difficulty was pointless. After splitting the reward 5 ways, it would be less than what they'd get from a simple D-grade mission. Dong-chul still thought it was too dangerous, but Il-woo, the hooded man, disagreed. He argued that with Seong-hoon fighting like 2 men and Ellie's powerful magic, they were more than strong enough to handle slaughterer difficulty. But Dong-chul wasn't convinced. He didn't want to take the risk and suggested they just aim for hunter difficulty instead. That's when Il-woo decided to make them an offer. He reminded them that the slaughterer rewards included 3 reinforcement stones. Then, he offered to give up his share of them completely. Sung-hoon knew those stones were worth 100,000 guilds each. Nobody gives up that kind of money for nothing. He wondered what Il-woo was really after. So, Sung-hoon asked him directly why he was pushing so hard for this. Il-woo finally admitted the truth. He was trying to complete his first awakening. Il-woo explained that to get a higher class, he had to clear 3 C-grade missions on slaughterer difficulty. Hearing that he'd give up rewards just to awaken, Dong-chul finally agreed. He pumped his fist and said they'd do it. Dong-chul took charge, saying safety came first. He told Sung-hoon to keep the enemies busy. If things got bad, Ellie was cleared to use her magic. He said they'd cleared this place before, so they knew the layout. He just needed Il-woo to make sure he took care of any traps along the way. With the plan set, Dong-chul led them into the darkness of the cave. Sung-hoon watched them go. Turns out, Il-woo had done his work for him. If the hooded man hadn't pushed for it, Sung-hoon was going to suggest it himself. As soon as they encountered the werewolves, Il-woo moved first, his blade a blur. Right behind him, Sung Ah-yeon let an arrow fly. The creatures went down fast, taken out before they could even fight back. Dong-chul grinned telling everyone to get ready. The cave's mid-boss was about to appear. He asked if anyone knew what they were up against. The hooded man, Il-woo, spoke up. He knew exactly what it was, the black werewolf. Dong-chul seemed impressed that he'd done his homework. He explained that after the next trap, they'd enter a large room. Inside, there would be 5 regular werewolves and 1 black werewolf. He warned them that the black one was seriously strong. Il-woo asked just how strong it was. Dong-chul admitted he couldn't say for sure, but from his experience, it was tougher than 3 normal werewolves combined. That's when Sung-hoon stepped forward. He calmly announced that he would take care of the black werewolf. Dong-chul was shocked. He asked if Sung-hoon was sure he'd be okay. Sung-hoon replied that while he didn't have any skills to finish it, he could at least keep it busy. Dong-chul laughed, patting him on the shoulder. He told him to just hold the creature back and do nothing more. Sung-hoon quietly agreed. With the boss handled, Dong-chul turned to Il-woo. He said he would take care of 2 of the werewolves, then asked if Il-woo could handle the other 3 on his own. Before Il-woo could respond, Ellie stepped forward. She told him she would take care of the remaining werewolves with her magic. She laid out a much better plan. She would take out 1 werewolf instantly. That would leave just 2 for her, Il-woo and Ayeon, to handle while the others were busy. Dong-chul grinned. He agreed that taking one down from the start would make the fight much more manageable. With the plan settled, Ellie gripped her staff, ready to begin. She closed her eyes and began to chant, gathering an immense amount of power. The top of her staff erupted in a blinding, fiery light. Sung-hoon watched, surprised. He hadn't realized she was this powerful. She unleashed a massive fireball, and the rest of the team could only stare, completely shocked by the raw power she just displayed. The spell hit with incredible force. It completely swallowed the werewolves in a wall of fire. Dong-cheol grinned. Everything was going exactly as planned. With the first wave cleared, the rest of the team moved in. Il-woo, the man in the coat, cut down another one without wasting a single movement. He had finished his part of the job. The smaller werewolves were all dealt with. That's when the real target showed up. The black werewolf was huge, with glowing eyes full of rage. Sung-hoon just stared back, completely unimpressed, and sarcastically welcomed the beast. Done with the introductions, the creature lunged straight for him. The werewolf lunged, but Sung-hoon was faster. He dodged under the attack, sword ready. That's when he used his hidden skill. Blue lightning erupted from his hand, engulfing the creature completely. The werewolf froze, completely paralyzed by the shock. Sung-hoon didn't hesitate. He swung his sword with all his strength, finishing it in a single, clean strike. He realized his skill level was now high enough to cast spells without speaking. This was a huge advantage. He could use his magic without anyone ever knowing. The others could only stare. The woman with the green scarf was the first to speak, asking in disbelief how he took down the black werewolf all by himself. She pointed out that even Dong-cheol struggles with one, but he defeated it in seconds. She wondered aloud if he was secretly a ranker. Sung-hoon knew this was exactly the kind of attention he didn't want, so he quickly made up an excuse. He told them Ellie's fireball must have weakened the creature first. He insisted that was the only reason he was able to take it down. Dong-cheol bought the lie completely. He praised Ellie for her incredible magic, and she just smiled and accepted the credit. Sung-hoon let out a quiet sigh of relief. His secret was safe. That's when the hooded man, Il-woo, offered to cook for everyone. The others were thrilled at the idea of a hot meal. The stew he made smelled amazing. The team gathered around the fire and started to eat. Il-woo told them there was plenty more for everyone, but as Sung-hoon took his first bite, a system window appeared. It was a poison warning. The food was tainted with a long-lasting poison that drained stamina. He knew it had to be Il-woo. Ellie noticed him pause and asked if something was wrong with the food. He quickly played it off, saying it just got caught in his throat. The others kept eating, completely clueless. This world wasn't like a simple game where every problem shows up on your status window. Just like his own poisoning skill, there were countless ways to fool the system. If you didn't have a way to detect it, you'd never know what hit you. But it didn't matter. A notification confirmed the antidote he'd taken had already neutralized the poison. After walking for a bit, they came to a fork in the road. Ellie pointed it out, asking which path they should take. Dong-cheol explained that the left path was full of traps, but the right one only had a few werewolves. He decided they'd go right, fight their way through, and finally take down the boss, the awakening moonwolf. With the plan set, Dong-cheol eagerly led the way, and the team ran down the dark tunnel behind him. But as they ran, one of them quietly reached out and pressed a hand against the wall. It was Il-woo. He paused for a second, a small smile on his face, ready to start his real plan. That's when the whole cave started to shake. They looked up in horror as the ceiling began to crack and crumble above them. Someone screamed that it was collapsing. Everyone scrambled for cover as huge rocks rained down from above. The dust settled, revealing a wall of rock that had split the party in two. On one side, Il-woo dropped the act, saying he was tired of pretending. On the other, Dong-cheol coughed and yelled at him, furious, asking why he didn't see the trap. Il-woo just played dumb. That's when Sung Ayeon panicked. She realized Sung-hoon wasn't with them. He was trapped on the other side of the rockfall. Il-woo just apologized, pretending it was a simple mistake. Dong-cheol was furious, accusing him of messing with them. Ellie and Ayeon quickly stepped in, trying to calm him down. They argued that Sung-hoon was fast and probably dodged the falling rocks. Ayeon worried that Sung-hoon would have to face the boss alone. Dong-cheol sighed in frustration. He decided they couldn't wait. With only a few spots left for the quest reward, they had to keep going. They moved deeper into the cave. In the darkness ahead, a pair of glowing blue eyes appeared. A massive, glowing wolf stepped out of the shadows. Dongchul yelled for Ellie to start the fight with a fireball. She gathered her power and unleashed the spell, sending it straight at the creature. But before the fireball could hit, the wolf let out a powerful roar. A system window popped up, warning them that the roar had just dropped all their stats by 10%. Dongchul ignored it and charged forward anyway, using his power step skill. Sung Hyun tried to draw her bow, but something was wrong. The arrow felt heavy in her hands, and she struggled to pull the string back. She stumbled, losing her balance. A moment later, Ellie did too. The stat drop was affecting everyone. But then, a blade sank deep into someone's back. It was Ilwoo. He had just stabbed Sung Hyun from behind. He explained that the blade was coated in poison. She wouldn't wake up for at least half a day. With that, he let her body fall to the ground. Then, Ilwoo turned his attention to Dongchul, who was still fighting the wolf. It was time to finish this. He threw a knife, and it hit Dongchul right in the leg. Dongchul screamed and fell to the ground, completely stunned. He looked up at Ilwoo, his eyes filled with rage. Dongchul was furious, calling him a backstabber, but Ilwoo just smiled. This was his plan all along. He demanded to know who ordered the attack. Ilwoo just laughed it off. He explained that no one was pulling the strings. He just thought they were worth using. Ilwoo then asked a chilling question, reminding Dongchul that this was his last life. The threat hit hard. Defeated, Dongchul started begging. He told Ilwoo he didn't care if he died, but pleaded with him to at least let Hyun go. He offered up all the rewards just for her safety, but Ilwoo wasn't interested. He said any rewards from them would be trash anyway. At that moment, the wolf attacked, and a wave of blue energy slammed into Dongchul. The energy tore right through him as he screamed in pain. Turns out, Ilwoo was following instructions he found on a glowing moonstone. It promised that if he offered 3 human sacrifices, he would receive a reward to revive the wolf's family. But the whole thing was a lie. Ilwoo knew it from the start, and he couldn't believe how easily they had fallen for it. And from the shadows, someone watched the entire betrayal unfold with a quiet smirk. Seong-hoon stepped out of the shadows, calling out Ilwoo for the betrayal. He told him to drop the act, saying he was about to die anyway. He then asked if 3 sacrifices were really enough, proving he knew the entire plan. Ilwoo was stunned. He couldn't understand how Seong-hoon knew, guessing he must have the expensive linguistics skill. He admitted he always thought Seong-hoon's movements were too good, like a ranker's. With that, he drew his dagger. He yelled out the name of his skill. The attack slammed into Seong-hoon's blade with a massive flash of light. Seong-hoon realized it was an active martial arts skill. That meant Ilwoo was fast and strong, and fighting him head-on would be tough. It would be even worse if he had a second life. He activated his own skill, drinking steps. Moving with blinding speed, he slipped past Ilwoo's attack and landed a clean slice on his arm. Ilwoo was shocked. The poison from the soup should have slowed Seong-hoon down by now, but he seemed perfectly fine. He remembered watching everyone eat it. The only explanation was that Seong-hoon had somehow neutralized the poison. Seong-hoon stood ready for the next move. Furious, Ilwoo let out a yell and charged forward again with another moon splitter. Seong-hoon dodged again, but this time, he didn't just evade. He twisted his body and drove his daggers deep into Ilwoo's chest. The attacker grunted in pain as the blades found their mark. Ilwoo dropped his sword and fell to his knees. The fight was over, but Seong-hoon wasn't finished with him. He told the man he couldn't die just yet. He grabbed Ilwoo by the collar and dragged him toward the glowing blue wolf. He offered the man up to the beast, telling it to eat. The wolf lunged forward, and Ilwoo disappeared in a flash of light and teeth. Seong-hoon watched calmly. He realized it was Ilwoo's first life, which meant he'd be back eventually. That could be a problem later. But for now, he had other things to worry about. He turned his attention back to the others. The moon wolf still needed another sacrifice. He looked between Ellie and Hyun. A powerful magician like Ellie would be a huge asset to him in the future, so the choice was simple. He apologized to Hyun, saying he had to sacrifice her. Without any hesitation, he threw her body in front of the beast. The wolf didn't wait. Her body dissolved into particles of light. Turns out, it was her first life too. She wouldn't remember any of this. She'd just wake up somewhere else, a victim with no memory of what happened. The moon wolf let out a final roar and transformed. A system window announced it was now the awakened moon wolf. It was bigger, but Seong-hoon knew it was weak. The last fight had drained most of its energy. He was sure he could take it down in an instant. He moved in for the final attack, but just finishing the mission wasn't enough. He knew a secret most people didn't. He smeared some of the wolf's blood onto the glowing moonstone. The stone rumbled and cracked, splitting down the middle. A hidden doorway appeared. He stepped inside without hesitation. He knew that players with low-level skills would see a treasure to revive their family. But his skills let him see the truth. The room was filled with open containers. Inside were 50 werewolves, completely unable to fight back. He smiled. Each one was worth a fortune in parts. This was like 300,000 gold just handed to him. He got to work. After he finished them all, his swordsmanship proficiency skyrocketed. He knew betraying and sacrificing people was a dirty way to play, but for a swordsman like him, it was the only way to get this strong, this fast. With the werewolves dealt with, I went back to Ellie. I gave her the antidote, and a moment later, her eyes fluttered open. She asked what happened, so I told her my version of the truth. I explained that Ilwoo had betrayed us and poisoned everyone. I told her that by the time I arrived, Ayan and Dongchul were already gone. She sat up and thanked me, saying she would have died if it wasn't for me. I just told her I did what needed to be done. But then she looked at me with this strange smile. She said that's exactly why she was thanking me, because not many people are like me. That's when she asked if I wanted to form a party with her. To be honest, turns out Sung-hoon wasn't the only one with a dark past. Ellie's father was a violent man. After her mother ran away, he turned on her, and she knew she had to do something to survive. So one night, when he had drunk himself unconscious, she quietly placed a burning coal briquette right next to his head. Her father passed away from the fumes. No one ever suspected a thing. That's when she learned a valuable lesson. If she just acted naturally, she could make anyone believe her words. She used that skill to survive in the mission, seducing and betraying others to get ahead. She knew the food was poisoned. She even knew the secret of the moonstone. She knew everything. She was just pretending to be poisoned, biding her time. But then she watched as Sung-hoon, the guy who looked so naive, took out Il-woo himself. And after all that, he had the nerve to try and trick her. She decided to play along, pretending she'd been fooled. She'd never met anyone like him before, and she wanted to know more. So when he asked to form a party, she gave him a sweet smile and agreed without hesitation. Far away, in a place the players couldn't even imagine, the gods were watching, and they were getting bored. Loki, the god of mischief, casually said the players were too weak to be interesting. A furious god named Asura started yelling at him for his rudeness, but another god stepped in to keep the peace. The older god had an idea. He suggested they introduce a ranking system to make the players compete against each other. On top of that, he wanted to add a mandatory S-grade mission to really push them. Another god pointed out that an S-grade mission might be impossible for anyone to clear, but the others weren't concerned. They started picking their favorite players, like choosing athletes for a team. One chose Ellie for her magic, while others mentioned Mi Rinai and Kong Wuhan. That's when Loki spoke up, saying the one he liked was Yu Sung-hoon. A goddess with fiery hair was surprised. She couldn't understand why he'd pick someone like Sung-hoon, especially when there were players like Jack Efron. Turns out, Jack Efron was known as absolute evil, a monster who just enjoyed hurting people. But Loki explained that wasn't what he wanted. He was looking for a different kind of villain, someone dirty and selfish who only thought about his own gain. That's why he chose Sung-hoon. With the discussion settled, the gods agreed. The patch would go live. And just like that, a system window appeared in front of every player. It announced a new ranking system with rewards and a mandatory S-grade mission in 15 days that no one could avoid. The players looked up in horror. To them, this wasn't just a game update. It was a death sentence. While most players were panicking, others saw an opportunity. Kang Wuhan, the Spear King, tried to calm down one of his guild members. He wasn't scared at all. He explained that the system wouldn't create a mission that was impossible to clear. He was sure he had a special ability that would help him get through it. He wasn't just planning to survive. He was planning to win big. Out in the city, it was total chaos. Players were desperately trying to form parties, buy better gear, and find anyone strong enough to help them survive. The promise of new rewards had driven everyone into a frenzy. But I wasn't paying attention to any of that. I just watched the madness from a quiet cafe. The mission wasn't what was on my mind. Instead, I was focused on 2 gift boxes that had suddenly appeared in my inventory. The system explained one was a reward for reaching rank 21. The other was a personal present from the god Loki. I had a feeling I knew who that was. I decided to open Loki's gift first. Inside was a rare skill scroll. It was a passive ability called Bluff and Bluster. It would make it easier for people to believe my words. It seemed kind of useless at first glance, but for a rare skill, it had to be better than nothing. With that settled, I turned my attention to the second box. But just as I was about to open it, someone walked up to my table. It was Ellie. She was talking about my progress, pointing out that I was just one C-grade quest away from my first awakening as a swordsman. She also mentioned she'd already changed her class to Apprentice Witch. She asked what mission I was planning to do next. While she listed off a few ideas, I was already thinking about the intel my broker gave me. He'd found a spiritualist leading a high-level escort mission. Most players were forming huge parties. They figured it was safer, even if it meant splitting the rewards. But I told Ellie I had a better idea. That's when we saw her. A spiritualist named Yu Charon was rallying her group for a C-grade escort mission. This was the party I was looking for. Ellie and I walked up and asked if they had room for 2 more. The spiritualist was a bit suspicious and asked to see my rank first. I showed her my status window, and her eyes went wide. She was impressed, commenting on my high stats and the fact that Ellie was a magician. She correctly guessed that I was a ranker trying to get my first awakening done before the big compulsory mission. I had to admit, she was sharp. She told us we were way stronger than the average player. Then she said she was glad to have 2 rankers joining them. That caught my attention. If she was counting Ellie and me, that meant there was already another ranker in her party. This was getting interesting. Just as I was about to relax, I saw a cloaked figure in the distance. I recognized those eyes instantly. It was the other ranker. Before I could react, the spiritualist raised her staff and shouted that it was time to start. I yelled for her to wait, but it was too late. A system window popped up, showing the mission details. There were different roles with different rewards, from a simple delivery man to a bodyguard. It was a high-risk, high-reward escort quest, and she'd just thrown us into it. We were transported to the mission area. Ellie looked over at me, concerned. She asked why I was acting so strange all of a sudden. That's when the cloaked figure appeared right in front of us. Ellie told me they were calling my name. I tried to play dumb, putting on a weird voice and saying they had the wrong person, but my act was cut short when a blade was suddenly pressed against my neck. The figure leaned in close, saying they were glad to have finally met me. They said they wanted to fight me at least once before the big mission started in 2 weeks. The hood came down, and I knew I was screwed. It was me, Rinai. I had been trying so hard to avoid her, but it looked like my luck had finally run out. We'd been transported to a wide open field, surrounded by forests and mountains. It was beautiful, but I wasn't in the mood to enjoy the view. Me, Rinai, didn't waste any time. She asked me to fight her, saying she already knew I was skilled enough to beat her. I immediately started my act, telling her she was completely wrong and that I was way weaker, but she didn't buy it. She just couldn't understand why I disliked fighting so much. I kept insisting I was no match for her. Just then, the spiritualist who started the mission cut in. She pointed out that we were falling behind the main group and suggested we talk while we walked. I quickly agreed. For now, the fight was off. As we started walking, Ellie quietly asked me who that person was. I told her it was me, Rinai, the magic sword. Her eyes went wide. She couldn't believe she was standing next to the top ranker. Suddenly, Ellie's whole attitude changed from cautious to excited. She ran up to me, Rinai, and asked for her signature. Without even hesitating, me, Rinai, just said no. Ellie was pretty annoyed by the rejection. I explained that's just how me, Rinai is. She looks normal, but she's a total battle junkie who doesn't care about anything else. Turns out, she heard every word I said. This was supposed to be an easy mission, but with her here, I knew it was going to be 10 days of hell. Just then, the spiritualist leader shouted for everyone to get ready. She warned us that a horde of orcs was about to attack. She told me, Rinai, to take the front line, and for me to guard the right side. And right on cue, the orcs came charging out of the woods. The party didn't hesitate. The mages unleashed a wave of spells, and everyone charged forward. But me, Rinai, was on another level. She moved like a blur, cutting through the orcs before they could even react. She was unbelievably fast, taking them all down in an instant. The others were impressed, but I knew this was a problem. If I just fought alongside her, I wouldn't get a single kill. I realized I'd have to use that other method. She paused for a moment, completely unfazed by the fight. After the fight, the spiritualist leader announced it was time for a lunch break. The whole party cheered, happy to finally get some rest and food. I walked up to the spiritualist, Miss Charon, and offered to take her place serving the food. I told her she should take a break too. She seemed impressed. She thought to herself that I was different from the others, who just grabbed their food and left. She happily thanked me and let me take over. With my plan in motion, I walked over to Mirinai. I started laying it on thick, telling her how incredible she was and that she'd surpass me in no time. She just stared back, completely unmoved. She told me I was just flattering her. This was my chance. While everyone was distracted, I quickly poured the poison into the food. Mirinai took the bowl and started eating. I just watched, thinking that once the poison kicked in, I'd finally be able to win our fight. But then, a whole bunch of system messages popped up for her. Her skills immediately detected the high-grade poison, one after another. Her abilities activated, first weakening the poison's effects, and then getting rid of it completely. My plan had failed. She wasn't affected at all, but she wasn't interested in my compliments. She cut me off and asked me to listen closely for a second. She leaned in and whispered that there was poison mixed into the food. I froze. To my surprise, she blamed it on goblins, telling me to alert the others while she scouted the area. It was a relief she didn't suspect me, but I was furious. How did she know? From a distance, Ellie was watching us. She figured we'd end up fighting eventually and wondered if she should get involved. She walked up to Mirinai, who seemed a little annoyed. She told Ellie that since they were the same age, there was no need to be so formal. Ellie immediately started to fake cry, saying Mirinai reminded her of her older sister. It worked perfectly. Mirinai got flustered and told her it was fine to keep doing it. But the second Mirinai turned her back, Ellie's friendly act vanished. She cast a curse on her, a spell to weaken her target. Mirinai's system immediately lit up. Her skills detected the curse and activated to fight it off, reducing its effects. She yelled for Ellie to run back and get me. Mirinai explained that someone was definitely targeting them. First there was poison in the food, and now she'd just been hit with a curse. I was stunned. She somehow saw right through Ellie's invisible spell. The spiritualist, Charon, stepped in. She said there had never been monsters that used both poison and curses before, but they'd keep watch on the way back just in case. But me, Rinai, didn't care about any of that. She looked right at me and declared that she was going to spar with me, whether monsters attacked or she got poisoned again. I was sweating. I told her this was the most I'd be able to do. We just stared at each other. Her expression was dead serious. I finally gave in. I told her I understood, but we should go somewhere with fewer people watching. I had a place in mind, a place where I might actually have a chance. We stood across from each other in a clearing. I told myself I would endure whatever came next. She announced it was time to begin. The fight started in a flash. She lunged forward, but I activated my skill, driving steps. I dodged right past her and grabbed her arm. She easily deflected my attacks, counting each one. She started to wonder if I was trying to lure her into a trap, or if I was really just this weak. Turns out, she was right about one thing. I was trying to lure her in. I just needed to get her to move towards the trap I'd set up beforehand. Our swords clashed, but then something went wrong. I felt my foot slip. I had completely misjudged where the trap was. I fell right into it myself. As I lost my balance, I stumbled forward and accidentally hit the back of Mirinai's knee. Her leg buckled instantly. She started to fall. She hit the ground hard. I had won, but it was a complete accident. My plan was ruined, and I had no idea idea what to do next. Rinai just sat there, stunned. She couldn't believe it. She had lost. I offered her a hand. She looked up and asked if I knew hand-to-hand combat. I thought about it for a second before admitting that I did have an intermediate skill, but she saw it completely differently. She thought I had planned the whole thing, dodging her sword strike just to move in and take her down. She decided she was the one who had been arrogant. She had one more question. She wanted to know why I chose to finish the fight with my hands instead of my sword. I just told her the truth. I dropped my sword, so I had to. Of course, she didn't believe me. She thought I was being humble, that I had intentionally used my hands to avoid hurting her. In her mind, I was this master fighter who had calculated everything perfectly. She told me not to be so considerate, that a winner shouldn't comfort the loser. She promised she would learn from this and grow stronger. Then she asked me to fight her again someday. I reluctantly agreed. This was the last thing I wanted. The rest of the escort mission went smoothly, but things had gotten weird. Before, I was the one trying to avoid Rinai. Now, she was doing the same to me. As we entered the city, a system window popped up, telling us the mission was over. Rinai just gave a slight bow and disappeared in a flash of light. I stood there for a moment, just thinking. Just then, an old woman walked up to me and asked if everything was all right. She said she'd been watching me during the escort and noticed I was helping out, even when it wasn't my job. She thanked me, saying that because of our group, her goods weren't damaged at all. I had no idea what she was getting at. Then she held out a small bottle, telling me to take it. I looked at the potion, and a system window appeared. It was a high-grade fermion extract, a rare and incredibly expensive item used as a catalyst for magic. Suddenly, it all made sense. This must be why Charon, the spiritualist, kept clearing the same mission over and over. Before I could even process it, someone grabbed me from behind. It was Ellie. She immediately started begging me to sell it to her for a discount. I told her that a magician like her needed it more than I did anyway. I asked if she really wanted it that much. She took the bottle, looking thrilled. She reminded me that we didn't have much time before the next mandatory mission, so we needed to upgrade our gear and skills. I had to agree with her. It was better to get stronger now than just keep hunting. I looked over my equipment. It was good enough for now. The most important thing was to get my class awakening done first, so I headed straight for the Temple of Class Change. I was surprised when Priest Philip remembered me, but he greeted me warmly. A system window appeared, showing me all my options. There were a lot of choices, like Enlightened Swordsman, Assassin, and Trapper. I immediately ruled out First-Class Adventurer. My entire fighting style was built around close-range combat, so it would be a waste to strengthen anything else. My mind went back to Rinai. That fight with her made me realize just how important close-range skills really were. Priest Philip tried to warn him, explaining just how dangerous a S-grade mission was, but Seung-hoon knew he needed a class that could adapt to anything, especially now. He had made his choice. The system confirmed it. He had awakened as an enlightened swordsman. All his stats increased by 5, and he learned 2 brand new skills, Taisum Arts and Polarity Reflection. With that done, all that was left was to master his new skills before the mandatory mission began. He spent the rest of the day preparing. The mission was set to begin the next day. As he was resting, he suddenly sensed a presence in the room. It was Jerry. He appeared out of nowhere, explaining they were short on time. He then revealed a huge twist about the mission. Every player would be taking over the body of someone else. He said the gods weren't just being cruel. This was their way of leveling the playing field, a kind of balance patch to make everyone stronger. He smiled, as if it was all just a fun game. Jerry explained the mission layout. It was divided into 3 battlefields based on player strength, but they were all connected. If one group failed, it would make things much harder for everyone else. He stressed that because of this, every single player had to pull their weight. Then he dropped a bombshell. The mission had incredible rewards, including the one thing every player wanted, an extra life. With that, he told Seung-hoon time was up and wished him luck. Jerry vanished in a flash of light. A moment later, the system window appeared. The mission was S-grade, Demon King Subjugation. The goal was simple, take down the Demon King. Seung-hoon's vision cleared. He was looking up at a fancy chandelier. He looked around the room and saw a mirror, but the person staring back at him wasn't him at all. It was a woman with long, white hair. He was in a woman's body. The shock hit him like a punch to the gut. This was going to be a lot more complicated than he thought.